Welcome to SAS, short and sweet tips for the business sector from the Case Mastermind Group. So tell us a bit more about step number 3.
So step number 3 and our tip number 3 is what we do in terms of how to assess candidates. And as I mentioned right at the beginning of this, we don't believe that standalone interviewing should be the way to bring key people into your business. We completely understand that there is a time and a place for one-to-one interviewing, and of course you've got to spend some one-on-one time with people, but we just don't believe it should be the only thing that you do when you're trying to decide who does and doesn't come into your organisation. So if you go back to what I said earlier around culture fit, it's really difficult if you're doing a standalone one-to-one interview to test whether a person is going to fit into your organisation. And that can be skills or personality-wise. And so what you have to try and do then is come up with something that's different to the interview, which is where our assessment days come in. Now, clearly, if it's not possible for you to do an assessment day in your organisation, what else can you do? Well, the whole process is designed around human interaction with other people. If you think about when you're doing your job, you're not really sat across a desk answering a series of questions, and that's what interviewing is. When you're doing your job, you're working with other people and you're just getting on with things. Yeah. So what we do with our days, for assessment days, is we devise a day that's tailored towards not only the role, but also tailored towards the business as well. And those personal characteristics that we mentioned in the advert, at the advert stage. So what can we do then to test for those things that we said were really important to this job? And there's no better way to test whether someone can do a specific skill or have a particular personality trait than to see it live in front of you. Because the other thing to mention about interviewing is, as much as it's a one-to-one process and a very one-sided process, candidates can become very practiced at interview techniques. And so they can answer all the questions in the way that you want them to be answered. And they can do really, really well at an interview, but you've not really got any idea of whether they can do the job or not, because you're having to base your information on what they're telling you. And sometimes what they're telling you isn't necessarily the truth. And they're not quite as good at a certain thing as they think they are. So the best way to do it is to bring everybody together, run a series of exercises, and some exercises will be smaller exercises, some exercises will be skill specific, some will just be more personality wise. But what you'll start to see throughout the day is a thread of that person's characteristics, that person's working style, and you'll start to see a pattern in their behaviour, which you will realise quite quickly will or won't work in your organisation, because you'll absolutely know what does and doesn't work in your organisation. You'll absolutely know what personalities will fit.
Yes, yeah, sure. And I think that is probably, and I think we've spoken about this before, that, you know, you can be a really good salesman and you're selling yourself and, you know, and you are biased when you go to an interview. You think you're going to tell them you're the best thing in the world that's ever happened to them. So, there is, and it's really interesting that you've developed some techniques over the years to get around that. To get around.
Of course, yeah. I mean, what we've done with our days is we kind of have a bunch of exercises, if you like, that we have in our arsenal. You know, we have some tools and tricks that we use all the time and that we always do on every selection day. But of course, there's always the odd exercise that we have to come up with because we've never done that before, or there's a particular style of working that the customer wants to see, and we have to come up with something for them. We do also ask the company as well to come up with a specific exercise that's specific to them, that's a potential issue or a potential challenge or something that's happened once upon a time in the business, just to give the customer an idea of what it actually might be like to see them doing something that's real to that role and real to that business. which is really more my tip, really. If you can't do a selection day, then just come up with at least one exercise that's part of the interview process where you can see them working with other people, get them working on a real challenge or a real issue, and you'll get much more of an idea of what they're like to work with, and the candidate gets much more of an idea of what you're like to work with as the recruiting company.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, put a group of people together. The leader comes out fairly soon enough, don't they?
Yeah.
And starts telling everybody what to do and coordinating everyone.
Yeah.
And then they'll show their style. If they're diplomatic enough, everybody will jump on board. Everyone will work together as a team. Or if they're just some little dictator, it's all going to fall to pieces quite quickly.
Absolutely, and you'll see that happen. And we say to people on our selection days, look, getting through this process doesn't mean that you have to be the loudest person in the room. It doesn't mean that you have to be the first person to want to lead an exercise or to jump to the flip chart every single time an exercise is set. That's not what the day is about. The day is about quality of contribution. That's what you're looking for. But you're absolutely right. All of that stuff that you've just mentioned is what comes out in people, because they can't keep up an act like they can in an interview on a full day. And their natural style just comes out because they're that engrossed in whatever it is that we've asked them to do. Their natural style just comes out.
Yes, no, absolutely. So that's brilliant. It's almost bringing everything up to the surface, isn't it? And saying, actually, look, this is the real person starting to show through, which is what you need, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really what you need. You don't want to be finding that out like a lot of people do 3, 6, 9 months down the road, and like, oh my goodness, this person's a nutcase, or they get upsetting everyone.
Absolutely. You want to kind of get a feel for that well before you've started to even think about employing this person. You want to think, is this person going to drive me nuts, or can I work with this person? Are there some things that I'm not sure about but we can work on? But it just gives you a much better idea, and it gives the candidate a much better idea of what you're like to work with as well. Because from a candidate's perspective, you have to think about, they're not treated very fairly sometimes through a recruitment process, and so they get sold a job in an interview, and then when they get the job, it's nothing like they thought it was going to be. The people are nothing like they thought they were going to be. The environment isn't anything, the job isn't anything like, and so they get a much clearer idea of who this business is, who are these people that I'm going to be working with, because we have 2 to 3 representatives with us on the selection day from the company as well. So they're getting a much clearer picture of who the business actually is.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because you do want to see what it's going to be like to work at this organisation. It is. Yeah, your first day is always this sort of, oh, what's it really going to be like? So any sort of drip feed into that, because at the end of the day, you're going to offer an applicant a job, but the applicant's got to want to say yes. So you are selling to each other in that process. And I think it got drummed into me, and I think school was a big advocate of it, that you're selling yourself. You've got to sell yourself to that company. But you're really right, that company's got to sell themselves to you. You've got to buy into that ethos, who they are, what they're about. And, that can be a great deciding stage for both parties.
Of course it can. I mean, that was, that's where I started my working life. It's changed so much. It used to be, why should I employ you, candidate number 1 or 2 or 3? It's very different to that nowadays. And actually, it's been turned completely on its head, where candidates are thinking, well, Mr. Employer, why should I come and work for you? And that's the way of the world. That's the way that the world is going. And so therefore, you've got to be demonstrating that you're doing something different, and that you're prepared to put yourself, as the business, as the recruiting business, you're prepared to put yourself up in front of the candidates and say, well, look, this is who we are.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm very with this. I mean, it's become a modern culture. It should have always been. It's always been there, but there's this culture now of, you know, do what you love, do what you enjoy, and that's
Yeah,
always been there. But people are talking about it more now because people are beginning to realise that, yeah, actually, it's not about what's going to pay me the most. It's about, am I going to go to work and enjoy every day, or am I going to go there like, but still a huge majority of people, if we said to them, well, look, if we cut your pay in half, would you still come here? Most people would say no. You know, I'm here for money.
exactly.
The number of times I've heard people say, you know, oh, I'd really like to leave this job. I'd like to do this. Oh, why would you like to do that? Because it's more money. And it's like, oh, wow, you know, it's just all about the money. You
Yeah,
can do this job for 50 years, possibly. Or if the government have their way, probably 60 years. So a huge portion of your life, enjoy it. You know, you want to come
yeah,
home to your family. I've been in a job I absolutely hated. I've been in a job I really enjoyed, and I've been in a job I really hated. And I've seen both ends of the spectrum. And it was a joy to go to work every day when I enjoyed it. And it was an awful thing to go out the door to the job that I despised. It was a great learning curve for me. And I didn't stay at that job very long, to be fair. But
we've all been there. We've all had that experience.
yeah, and it was a good it was a good experience. It made me really wake up to the way I've seen bad, poor management. I've seen really good management, and it's so enlightening. You've got to see both ends of the spectrum to get a balance. And yeah, I'm glad it was a learning curve. I certainly wouldn't want to do it again.
Yeah. Any of us would, but I think relevant to what we're talking about, because candidates nowadays, when they're actually job seeking, that's actually where they come from. They come from a position of, well, why should I go and work for this business? They don't come from a position of, oh, I really need to sell myself to this business. It's very, very, very different nowadays, the recruitment world, to how it was, you know, even 5 to 10 years ago. And so companies now have to be seen to be doing something different in order to entice the right people and to attract, not just to attract, but to retain the right people as well. And so if you can be seen as doing something different, that's going to set you aside from the others as well.
Yeah, definitely. And probably as a little aside on the end of that really great bit of advice you've given there, more and more we're hearing and seeing the entitlement mentality coming to the fore. And you know, there's all big discussions about it. It's a very topical subject, but it's becoming this world of people now coming to an employer and saying, well, I'm coming to do you a favour. You know, here I am, you need me, I'm doing you the favour, you're not doing me any favours. So it's almost turned completely on its head from the Victorian age, you know, the employer hanging over you like Ebenezer Scrooge. But how do you deal with that mentality? Because that obviously, that's something that isn't always necessarily visible on set, but is there a way that you get to dig that out and bring that to the surface? Because that's really important, the entitlement mentality.
Yeah. It is, and I would say it's more difficult to do that if you are just going to do interviews.
Yeah.
But I think what people who tend to have that as a personality trait, that will come out if you do something other than interviewing them. If you put them with other people, particularly nowadays, they soon learn that actually the way to get through this process is by collaboration. This is not via me being in competition with candidate X that's sat next to me. And so they tend to quickly find out actually that temperament and that that way of thinking is just not going to get them through the process. I think that it's right for candidates to be picky. I think it's right for candidates to think, well, why should I come and work for your organisation?
Yes.
But I think it's about getting balance. I think it's about getting the balance right between, well, what can you offer me, Mr. Employer, as opposed to, well, I'm doing you a favour coming and working in your organisation, because it's a very, that's a very dangerous game to play, because there's always going to be somebody better than you sat next to you potentially, that knows a little bit more than you do.
No, absolutely. No, that's brilliant. There's some really good points in there. Fantastic. Thank you for spending time with us today. This has been brought to you by the Case Mastermind Group. Please be sure to follow us in the links to this message. Please give your real, honest feedback on what you have just heard, and share what you enjoyed or liked the best. We really do check the feedback that we receive. Please also share with your friends who you believe could benefit from it, just to show you care. To our listeners, remember, no matter where you are on the mountain of success, let's enjoy the journey together to the top. We will see you there, my friends.